Thank you for attending the third in our Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow webinar series, Integrating the Garden, Classroom, and Café, a partnership between Chartwells and KidsGardening.org. I'm Larry Keys, the webinar moderator. This webinar is to support the Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow program to guide educators through the process of successfully developing, growing, and sustaining school gardens, regardless of space, climate, or resources that they may have currently available. As part of the Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow School Garden program, we're providing 6 garden-related webinars, a Facebook forum, and the grant opportunity, which has closed, but which we are working and supporting even as we speak. We'd like to briefly tell you about our 2 terrific partner organizations who have come together to create the Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow program. Chartwells K-12 partners with more than 575 school districts ranging from large public institutions to small charter and private schools, and prides itself on delivering a unique food service experience for students rooted in what's important to each community. Chartwells K-12 is a culinary-focused organization with a mission to extend its passion, dedication, knowledge, and enthusiasm into serving each student delicious and nutritious meals. Chartwells brings to life its Eat, Learn, Live philosophy through partnerships like the one with KidsGardening.org that help bring more gardens to schools that support good nutrition, hands-on food and wellness education, and building lifelong healthy habits. It's not just about gardens for Chartwell schools, it's about gardens for all schools, which is why the Eat, Learn, Live, and School Garden Guide, Grant, and Webinar series are available to all schools across the country. KidsGardening.org has been a leading resource for school and youth gardening since 1982, providing garden grants, research, and curriculum. Kids Gardening creates opportunities for kids to learn through the garden, engaging their natural curiosity and wonder by providing inspiration, know-how, networking opportunities, and additional educational resources. They provide free lesson plans, activities, grant opportunities, and curriculum. Our 6-part webinar series discusses various topics which cover the fundamentals of launching and maintaining a school garden. We're providing instructive and creative gardening tips, nutrition education materials, and guidance for building a community garden. As part of the Eat, Learn, and Live program, we've created a private Facebook forum specifically to allow you to ask questions and chat with the folks at Chartwells and Kids Gardening about any aspect of school gardening and about our grant programs. We'll give you details and a link to that page later in the program. We're joined today by our KidsGardening.org experts, Charlie Nardozzi and Sarah Pounders. For the first 20 minutes or so, Sarah will give us ideas for integrating the school garden into the classroom and cafeteria. For the second 20 minutes, both Sarah and Charlie will be giving us ideas for garden curricula and lessons and activities, and we'll provide downloadable handouts. The handouts can be downloaded from your GoToWebinar control panel handouts button, but we'll also make these available from links on our Facebook page. Finally, Charlie and Sarah Pounders will take your questions during the last part of our webinar today. This is your chance to get your questions answered about school gardens in general or questions specific to the Eat, Learn, Live, Grow application program. You can type your questions at any time during the webinar. To do that, click on the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel and type your question in the box. We'll take as many questions as we can. Questions that we don't get to during the webinar, we'll post on our Facebook forum. So now I'd like to introduce both of our panelists today. Charlie Nardozzi is a nationally recognized garden writer, speaker, and radio and television personality. He has worked for more than 25 years bringing expert gardening information to home gardeners. Charlie delights in making gardening information simple, easy, fun, and accessible to everyone. His energy, exuberance, and love of the natural world make him a popular speaker and presenter. We are so pleased to have him with us today. So I'm going to bring Charlie in right now, and he should be appearing momentarily.
There we go.
There he is. Whoops, I just lost him.
Yep.
Come back, come back.
We'll try again. Ah, there I am. Thank you, Larry.
Very good. And I think Charlie is going to is going to introduce Sarah.
Yes, exactly. So again, welcome to everyone for coming to the webinar all about integrating the garden into the curriculum and into the cafe. And it's an exciting topic, and especially now that the school year has started. And to really lead us through this whole webinar, Sarah Pounders, our education specialist who's been with Youth Gardening for over 20 years, is going to be kind of the focal point of this, and I'm going to help her as we get a little bit further on. But Sarah is the perfect person to do this job. She's coordinated numerous children's garden programs and conducted research on the benefits of using school gardens to teach nutrition curricula. She writes curricula and activities for youth of all ages and conducts both youth garden education programs and teacher training sessions, integrating the garden into the classroom. And plus, on top of all these professional credentials, Sarah lives this too. She has 2 daughters who are in the local elementary school. She is a volunteer garden coordinator at that school. So welcome, Sarah. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to go out for coffee, and I'll be back about halfway through to help you with the rest.
All right. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charlie, very much for that introduction. Like you said, I have been doing this for about 20 years now. I started with my very first garden program back when I was in graduate school, and I served as the volunteer garden coordinator for special needs classroom for about 2 years while I was doing my research focused on using school gardens to teach nutrition education. And so that was how I got started. I like to think of that first garden that I worked on and as my garden I learned a lot from my mistakes from. And since then I've worked with a number of different gardens and from informal to formal education locations. And just a little bit more background, because I'm going to be bringing this up a number of times, as I do work with the gardens at both my son's preschool and my daughter's elementary school. And I am sharing these pictures with you. The one with the marigolds is from the preschool, but the one that I'll probably, oops, wait, not quite ready for that slide, probably share the most from is my daughter's elementary school, and those are pictures from our spring garden up at the top, and right in front of you is our new garden that we've just installed and we're getting ready to plant tomorrow. So I guess what we're going to provide a lot of different examples as we go through all this and talk about some ideas, but I want to start out by saying that there's no perfect school garden, that there's no perfect way to integrate it into your curriculum, but there's a perfect process for figuring out how to integrate it into your school and get it installed as a feature of your school, to really embed it in the culture of your school. And that is to look at the needs of the teachers and students and parents, and then match that with the resources you have available. And so as we're going through all this, I want to just make sure that that message comes across, is that every garden is going to look different, they're all going to have different focus, and it's going to work. What works best for you may not work for the garden that's a mile down the road. So that's one thing that I kind of wanted to share with you, and also share off my garden. We've just hauled 6 yards of soil in 95-degree heat, so I thought I wanted to share that. And here you'll find, we're going to start out with an audience poll, and we'd like to see who's in the audience today. If you can select teacher, volunteer, cafe staff, administrator, other, and that way we can get an idea of who is here and listening in. All right. Okay, so it looks like we have a little bit of a sampling of everyone. So excellent. Very good. So that means we'll try and provide something for everyone as we go through all of this. So clicking through, before we begin talking about any specifics about any subject matter, we really need to look at what the first thing that you probably, if you're a new gardener or have an existing garden, the first thing that you had to answer was why. Why do we want a garden? Why should we have a garden? Why should we invest in a garden? And the garden as a teaching tool offers a number of benefits and opportunities. First of all, it's hands-on experiential learning. So it's hands-on, it's practical activities. Get your hands you get to see the results. Instead of just measuring the volume of a random cube, you measure the volume of soil that you need to purchase to put in your raised bed. Instead of measuring how much rain is there just to keep track of it. You measure the rain so that you can decide whether your plants are getting enough water or you need supplemental water. So it makes something very practical, and it makes it more important in connecting it to what they're learning. Oh goodness, I went too fast again. Sorry about that. It also helps connect students to the natural world and to their food origins. They get to see where their food comes from, and it's like having a little field trip to a natural area right there at your school. And just in general, it kind of has a magical quality to it. It fosters a sense of excitement and wonder in ways that not all educational tools can do. I think that the one thing to keep in mind for this is that a garden needs to be hands-on. It makes a very big difference as you're integrating it, as you're planning your activities, is that the kids are actually involved on a very deep level. When we first started our garden, the very first year, we received a grant for 10 garden beds. And we tried to get every class to have a chance to be out in the garden. We wanted everyone to feel like they were a part of it. But we found that people weren't getting engaged at all, and we were kind of like, maybe we need to sit back and think of something else. So we decided the next season we were just going to focus on one grade level. So we just focused on 4th grade, and we created a program where we divide all the beds into small plots. It's kind of a square foot gardening sense. It's not actually square foot. They're a little bit different shapes because of the size of the bed. But basically, kids partner up, and the 2 kids plan their space, decide what they want to plant it, harvest it, maintain it, weed it, do everything. And it was like a whole different program. All of a sudden, the kids really felt engaged. The teachers felt engaged. They were bringing home things for their parents to share. And even though they are only getting it to use it once in one grade level, they're getting to use it on such a deeper level that it really made a big difference. So that's hands-on is critical when you're looking at integrating it into your curriculum, is you need to have those opportunities. Now, the garden that I showed you that we had just built, we're finally expanding, so I'll get to that more in a minute. But school gardens, just kind of for a background of school gardens, because school gardens kind of get a feeling of something new and exciting, but actually school gardens have been around and used as a teaching tool for a long time. The first written record was back in the 16th century, saying that it was a great way to connect with a school, and every school should have them. Some very well-known educators along the way, such as Maria Montessori and John Dewey, they've all promoted the idea of using the school garden. And then it kind of just a garden trend in general. You can kind of see the first official school garden. I don't know how they decided that, but the first official school garden was in 1891 in the United States. It was much more prevalent throughout Europe before that. But then it was very popular, and grew, and the USDA actually at one point had a special office within the USDA that focused on school gardens. And they estimated in 1910 that there were 80,000 school gardens across the United States. But then we saw a decline when it came to technology in the 50s. They declined and got away from the outdoor learning. Then we saw another rise back in the 70s with a focus on environment. And then in the 90s, and when I first got started, even when I got started, environmental attitudes, butterfly gardens were the big thing, because that was really the focus. But since the 1990s, there's been more emphasis on nutrition education and food gardening, and so that's an area that's really exploded, and that's kind of where we are on our trend today, is installing nutrition and fruit and vegetable gardens. I found an estimate with the Library of Congress that about 25% of the schools in the U.S. is the estimate that they have a school garden. So school gardens are around, and one of the keys that is to making it a more solid part of the school is adding to the research, the evidence-based research of how the garden actually impacts the learning. And there's a number of different areas that are focused on, and there's the academic aspect, environmental, which is how it affects how their environmental attitudes, appreciation for nature, respect for their community, social aspects, how does it work with life skills and behavior, and of course, like I mentioned, the big one right now is definitely nutrition and health, and improving nutrition knowledge, vegetable preferences, and hopefully eventually behaviors to add on to that. So I don't have a chance, since this is such an important part of getting it integrated into your curriculum because it helps you get the support from administrators and from parents to show that it's a valuable use of time, we have created a handout that's in the handout section that just lists some of the studies that have come across the way, and this is something we're always adding to. So how do you reap all these benefits of the garden? And it is because of you integrate it into your classroom. You make it a part of the culture of your school. It's really something that's not accidental. It's not really spontaneous. You have to create set goals and work towards those goals to establish that. Just having the garden on grounds is good, but you're not going to see the same kind of benefits as if you incorporate it into the educational programming. So careful planning is needed. One thing I always like to say is that a strong garden program is a marathon and not a sprint. You cannot have an instantaneous, wonderful program that just insta program is not possible. You have to start out small and build over time and get your feet on the ground. I would say we started the garden that I showed you 4 years ago, and every couple of years, every year it just grows a little bit more, a little bit more. With that first year that we planted it, I probably had 2 or 3 parent volunteers that helped, and we had 1 main teacher that was really behind it. This year we've got 20 parent volunteers coming to help for our planting day, and we had every 4th grade and 3rd grade teacher participating, and those are the grade levels that we're focusing on, participating in the project days that we have. So it's really grown over time. And like I said, that every school garden is going to look different. It needs to meet your needs, and keep in mind you have to use it or you lose it. If you don't use it actively, if it's just something that someone comes in and does a beautification day, seasonally, you will not be able to sustain it at that level. So the big thing for this is to connect it to your standards. So the question is, why is the garden a valuable use of the precious instructional time that's so limited? And the way to, although there's all of the different benefits that I've just listed, by connecting it to the standards, you're really showing the teachers that the garden is not an extra thing that they need to add to their day. You're showing them that it's the tool to teach the things that they're already teaching. It shouldn't be something that's just additional. It should be something that's fully, that it's just the means of teaching those things. So for the educational standards across the country, you've got the Common Core standards and English, language, arts, and math. You've also got the next generation science standards are the big ones. Not all states are part of those too. You've also got state and local standards in some areas. It's going to vary. And then when you're looking at those standards, there's 2 different ways to kind of approach it. One is your standards can guide your lesson and your activities. And that's actually what we're doing with our 3rd grade. For our 3rd graders, one of the things they're supposed to learn is, very specifically, they're supposed to learn the life cycle of a tomato. And so that's driving our garden program, because it means that we are going to have each class choose a recipe that features a tomato. They're going to start the tomatoes from seed and watch them grow. They're going to plan all the ingredients for that recipe, and then we're going to end with a day where they make the recipe. So in that way, the standards actually helped us with our plant selection. The other way is to have your activities first establish, know what you want to do, and then go back and see which standards it will link to. And it is something that is pretty natural to link to. And you can also, when you do it that way and you have an activity, sometimes when you're looking at the standards, you kind of have to think about it and figure out if there's a way that you can enhance your activity so that you can incorporate more standards. So for instance, if you were doing a science lesson and you were looking at how bees pollinate in your garden. You want to go out to the garden, you want to observe pollination in progress. Well, what you can do is, if you need to add a creative writing activity to it, you can have the kids write a narrative pretending that they're a bee and having what are they thinking, what are they talking about, how are they choosing the flowers that they stop in on. So it's just one of those things where with a little bit of thought you can figure out a way to connect them and make it a real strong tool for you. So this is this picture was something that was featured in our Grow Lab book, and It's something that people always ask for, even though it was done many years ago. But it's just a visual of how the garden project can be integrated in all different subjects. And so this one is giving you ideas for language arts, social studies, science, math, music, art, health, physical education, and just how you can kind of, everything kind of grows on each other. So there's not one thing, and it takes a little bit more and to try and it takes some planning, like I said, to try and achieve those other things. And what we're going to do today is, first, before we get started, what we're going to do today is going to go through it subject by subject and give you some concrete ideas of how you can incorporate all these different subjects. But we'd like to start by doing a poll to see which subjects you're already working on and focusing on. So we've got science and math. We combine those together. English, history and social studies, the arts, and health and nutrition. So if you can just select which one you're currently using, or if you're a new garden program, what you are planning to use. And I think it'll just take a minute to pop up the results. There they are. Oh, so science and math, and then health and nutrition is at the top. And that follows very closely with the garden trends. So you guys are right on target with what we find right now. So first thing, connecting to science is really the natural connection for the garden. It is a living science lab. It's a place to do experiments, a place for observation. It's a place to study all of the ecosystem and how it all interacts. So with the next generation science standards, which really have a hands-on component and a practical component to them, which makes them even a better connection with the garden as a tool. It divides up into 4 different disciplinary core ideas. And so I've just kind of listed some of the ideas behind it and how that fits in. This is the core ideas, how they fit in. So for like physical science, you've got light energy photosynthesis. For life science, you've got tons. You've got plant needs, life cycles, functions of the parts, all the different relationships and adaptations, inheritance of traits, all of those different things are highlighted. Earth science, you've got weather and climate, soil, great connections to soil, to learn how soil impacts your plant growth and food production, really brings, I think, brings soil studies alive. Engineering, technology, and applications of science is the 4th area. There's lots of examples of different garden programs that have been designed to try and to solve problems out there in the world right now, such as rain gardens, soil remediation, green roofs, hydroponic growing to optimize, production. So all of those things are great connections. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to give you a specific example. This is one of my favorite activities to do with kids. It's from our Grow Lab curriculum. It's called Flowers Up Close and Petal Attraction. And in this activity, the kids learn about all the different parts of a flower. And then they're charged with designing their own flower, making a whole new flower. They can choose any color, size, shape. They just have to have the parts represented. They have to decide on smells, textures, all of this different things. And then to follow up with petal attraction, they have to create an ad campaign for their flower. Why a pollinator would want to visit them and pollinate their flower. And an additional, they can also develop a whole pollinator too if you have time available. The kids love this. Actually, I've done this with adults. Adults love this too. So you come up with this whole new flower. And it's great because it develops, and I've kind of pointed out some ways it fits in with the next generation science standards, because as far as practices go, it uses a model and they are obtaining and evaluating and then communicating the information. So they're learning about the flower, they're evaluating how it all works, and they're showing you that they understand how it works by creating their own model out of it. And so you can see how it goes through the cross-cutting concepts with structure and function. And the core ideas, you've got the life sciences heavily represented there. So it's great it really helps the hands-on, and you can see that they're learning it. And so next, Charlie's going to bring up a math example for us. So Charlie, let's bring you back in.
I'm back, yes.
There he
Great
is.
coffee, by the way.
That was the coffee.
That was very good. So as Sarah was saying, we're going to go through the different subject areas, science, math, English, arts, nutrition, all of those, and I'm going to talk about a couple of them here. And the first one is going to be connecting to math, which is another one that's kind of a natural one you would think about, just like with science. There's a lot of practical math, real-life situations you can do using the garden, measuring growth rates, collecting data, graphing growth rates, creating planting schedules, and designing a garden to scale. So the example I want to show you for this one would be from a book called Math in the Garden. So you math teachers out there, this is a book tailored just for you. It's really tailored for the ages around 8 to 13. And of course it addresses many of the Common Core math standards, specifically for grades 2, 3, and 5 around measurement and data domain and geometry domain for the same grades. And one of the lessons that I like in this Math in the Garden textbook is one all about perimeter and area. So this is a great one to do, especially if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out, I don't really have a garden yet, I want to do some things with the natural world, I want to actually use natural world materials in the classroom, but I'm not really ready to jump into doing a whole garden. Or maybe you have a garden, you want to expand it a little bit too. So what you would do with this program is you'd have the kids go out and collect leaves. So a great thing to do in the fall. All different shaped leaves, and try to steer them away from those really small leaves like the honey locust leaf. That one's not really going to work very well for this activity. More like the maple leaves, the oak leaves, the ash leaves, those kinds of leaves. Bring them back into the classroom and then pair the kids up. And what you do is you give them a string, each one of the kids a string, and they can actually go around the edge of that leaf, each one of the leaves that they have there, going right back down to where the leaf attached to this tree, and then kind of see and cut it at that point, and then have the string laid it out, and so right next to the leaf, so you can see what the perimeter is, how long that perimeter is. And then have all the kids line up the leaves with their strings and actually have a discussion about it, because a lot of times you might have a small leaf with a lot of jags in and out that actually has a bigger perimeter than a large rounded leaf like a tulip poplar, for example, that may not have as long a perimeter. So it's a great opportunity to have discussion about perimeters and why you would measure things and types of things you might measure in your real day life. Then you can take that activity and go to the next level, which is all about area and how area is different than the perimeter. And in this one, you can get a graph paper that has these 1 centimeter squares on it, lay your leaf on it, and just trace over that leaf onto the graph paper. Then pull the leaf off, and then they can actually count the number of square centimeters that is the area of that leaf. And then they can figure out, you can have ways to figure out for half squares and quarter squares exactly. And so again, bringing this back to real life, you can talk about how you would use this when you're talking about rugs or other things that you might be using. So it's a very real life example using the natural world to do perimeter and area activities, so you're meeting the standards and making it a little bit more engaging. So for the next one, we're going to move on to the English arts and languages. And this, of course, is all about reading stories, about gardens, insects, solutions, researching plant instructions, writing out things, journal writing, poetry writing. Maybe you want to write a song all about a plant. That could be a fun little activity in the classroom. And then, of course, speaking and listening, developing those language and communication skills that we all value, and to do this around the garden activities you might be using, whether it be delivering them right in the classroom or maybe to parents or teachers or other administration at a certain festival. And the activity that I wanted to highlight in this one, a good example of these English language arts activity, is from a book called Books in Bloom. Books in Bloom. Now this is a book that has been put together by some university professors all about common childhood stories that have to deal with the garden somewhat. And the one I want to choose from here that will address things, again, related to the Common Core standards of literature, speaking, and listening, and the next generation science standards, is one called Miss Rumphius. Now Miss Rumphius, for those who don't know the story of it, and you all should, probably someone should have read it to you when you were little. Miss Rumphius is a great children's story, a classic, award-winning children's story, about a woman who at a young age had a grandfather who she adored, and he had traveled the world and he lived by the sea, and she said, "Grandpa, when I'm old, I want to be like you. I want to travel the world and have lived by the sea." But her grandfather made her promise one more thing, and that one more thing is you have to make the world a more beautiful place. So the story goes on through the book about how Alice, the granddaughter, goes through her life, travels the world, and she ends up living by the sea, the coast of Maine. But she remembers the thing that she promised to her grandfather way back when, that she needed to make the world a more beautiful place. And what she decided to do was start collecting all the wild lupin seeds around her coastal Maine area and save the seeds and spread them. So she got the nickname of the Lupin Lady. So the story is all about her story about making the world a more beautiful place, and it's a great segue into talking to the kids about how do you make the world a more beautiful place? How would you go out and do that so that everything is a little bit better? How have you done that in your life, in a little way or in a bigger way? And then you can do a whole activity around it. And of course this connects to science standards in the sense that you're talking about seed germination and seed dispersal. So you can talk about seed germination and how that works, and also how seeds would disperse themselves. Are they dispersed by birds, by rain, by water, or by mechanical means, just have some seeds like jewelweed, for example, just explode out of the pod and spread around an area. So you might go out and actually collect some of these seeds with the kids. Then you can have a lot of fun with it, and you can create what we call seed bombs. So this is a seed bomb is a little ball that's made out of compost, clay, and water, and then you take some of the wild seeds or the cultivated ones, like poppies, for example, put them in the seed bombs, and then you and the children can decide where, and maybe around the school or some other area, it would be a nice place to make it a little more beautiful. And so they can have the kids tossing the seed bombs into those areas. This is one of the only times where it's okay for kids to throw dirt around, when you're throwing seed bombs around in these areas. So a fun little activity that you can do with kids all around this story, Miss Rumphius, and as you go through the book, there's lots of other stories too that we can tell. Then moving on to the next activity, that would be all about connecting history and social studies. Not only talking about historical and geographic events, so different gardening techniques, historical events related to garden crop production, for example, but also things about government rules. Maybe if you have a garden already, talking about developing garden rules and using that to talk about government rules and regulations or school rules and regulations. And then stuff about the culture and civilizations, ethnic groups, ethnic foods that are consumed, discovery of different celebrations and traditions around food in different ethnic areas. And the story that I'd like to, or lesson I'd like to highlight in this area of history and social studies, it comes from Farm to Table and Beyond, which is one of the life curricula. And this one is for kids maybe a little bit older, and it's all about food. And this one is, one activity that I wanted to talk about here is about food transportation. So this gives you an opportunity to connect to a lot of common core standards around the English arts, next generation science standards with earth science, engineering, technology, etc. I have them all listed there. And in this activity, what you're doing is you're talking about the history of food transportation. Ever since we were able to grow food, we were moving food around. Whether it was early man's efforts to move it by alpaca or yak or camel, all the way up to the modern day, and which is where you were going to focus this activity, of course, maybe the last couple of hundred years, when they're moving them by ships, by ocean liners, by airplanes, by trucks or vehicles, by railroads, by inland barges. So you have 5 different groups of transportation. You have the kids research these groups and talk about how technology changes over time. Maybe even ask them how technology has changed in their life. If these are a little bit older children, they may have enough perspective to say, oh yeah, I remember before the iPod 7 was around. It's a whole other technology now. So you can have them really think about the sense that technology changes as years go by. Then you can break up the classroom into groups of 5, and using these 5 group areas, you can have them do research about transportation using vehicles, planes, rail, barges, and ocean liners, and how all that works. What are the advantages and disadvantages of doing it that way? You might even give them an example or a problem to solve. For example, you might have an apple grower up in eastern Washington State. He's got a bunch of apples he wants to sell, and he's got a buyer down in Biloxi, Mississippi. So how are you going to get those apples down to Biloxi? So each group would try to figure out the best way to do it, what the advantages and disadvantages of that group, and then you take one representative from that group to form kind of your expert group where they all talk about of these 5 different ways, which one makes the most sense. And it's a good way to combine a lot of different talking about a lot of different modern topics around energy consumption, climate change or pollution, and just the economics of moving food from one place to the other. You could even bring in fruits and vegetables from a grocery store and have them do a little research. Where did this mango you think came from? How do you think it got here? How about these strawberries? So it's a great way to use food as a way to really foster conversation and research into this really important topic. So I'm going to throw it back over now to Sarah.
Okay, great. So another topic, now this isn't part of usually the core standards, but we've got connecting to the arts. Gardening in itself is an art form. You've got garden design from visual aspect, you've got garden design, learning about all the different textures, shapes, forms, functions, learning about scale, proportion. It really lends itself to any of those. Performing arts can also be incorporated. You can use garden-inspired dance. You can act out the growth of a seed. All sorts of things. For art lesson examples, the Growing Classroom has some really great examples. One of the visuals, and this also incorporates nutrition, as an activity called Eat a Rainbow, where kids learn about the different colors, especially for young children, and then the health benefits that are associated with those, and why those colors indicate what health benefit they offer. For performing arts, you've got the Growing Classroom also has some great things. For every chapter has a song. And I am not going to sing for you today.
Oh, come on, Sarah, sing a song.
Because everyone would just jump right off. So, however, the songs are available. Life Lab has a YouTube channel, and you can go listen to them perform the songs. So people much more talented than me. Also, and so now we're getting to connecting to health and nutrition. And as y'all mentioned, that it sounds like a lot of you, that's your focus area. So let me kind of point out there's a couple different aspects that you can really focus on with this. The first one that I think of is actually the one that I have listed last, which is, oops, and then I skipped ahead, sorry. And that is using the garden as a way to really get people exposed, the kids exposed to different fruits and vegetables, to get them excited about it, to give them a motivation to try them. It is so true that if they have grown it, they will eat it. Radishes are the prime example because very few people eat radishes, but if they grow them, they will try them. And they're a great school garden vegetable just because they're a sure thing usually. But there's also the other aspects of connecting to health, and that's the mental aspect, of especially an emotional aspect, giving kids a break from technology, getting them to be grounded. One of the things about all of these things that we have talked about in the past is that it really is, it's a learning tool that appeals especially to kids that have a hard time grasping abstract things and can get overloaded. The garden's a great place for them to learn. Physical aspect of obviously gardening, shoveling, weeding, all of those things can add a physical aspect to it as long as you've got it so that they're really engaged and have a part to play in that. So for our lesson example, I'm going to highlight something from our Growing Food book, which is part of the Life series. And Life is part of is from the Teachers College of Columbia University, and it's a science lesson. It's a book of science lessons, but it's through a food lens. So you're using, you're incorporating it into your science curriculum, but you're focusing on food as a topic. And so, for instance, instead of just talking about the parts of the plant and what they do, you're also talking about the parts of the plant that you can eat. So in this activity, they do celebrating plant parts, and then they make a plant part salad. So they eat lettuce, carrots, celery, broccoli, tomatoes, sunflower seeds. And so they get to enjoy it. They're having that hands-on lesson, and they found a place for it in their classroom by involving it and tying it with the science curriculum. One thing that you'll note about health and nutrition is that in changing eating behaviors and habits is that you can't just provide the knowledge. They really have to have the hands-on experience. They need to make the recipes. They need to taste many times, especially for a lot of kids, over and over again to actually incorporate that food into their diet. And so with that in mind, part of the Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow process was to develop some Simply Good activities where it is based around highlighting one fruit or vegetable each month and really focusing on it as a school. So, and here's along the side you'll see the different fruits and vegetables that are highlighted, and we've tried to find things that you can grow at your school and in your school garden. Some of them are a little challenging. I know oranges may surprise people, but there are a lot of
Yeah.
satsumas now that are actually developed to be container plants. So you can look into those. I don't know, Charlie, if you have any of those up in Vermont, but
not yet, but we're going to be working on it.
Okay, well, maybe we'll get you one. But they really do grow as container plants if you get the right varieties. So what this incorporates is we try to make sure that it has all the different components to connect kitting to the cafe. So the kids, there's an aspect of those lessons where they grow the plant in the garden. They have lesson ideas that they do in the classroom. Then they go to the cafe, they have exposures to these fruits and vegetables, and some of those ideas for how they can have those exposures depending on what's available. If the kids, the best would be if the kids are able to actually help with the food preparation and learn about the safety, but on a smaller scale, having promotional displays, having special tasting events, maybe once a month, twice a month, depending on however many can fit in, where the kids get to taste and vote on their favorites maybe, or they vote how they feel about it at the beginning of the month, and then try it again after you do all these activities at the end of the month and see if it changed. Cooking demonstrations, both in school or I know a lot of programs are also trying to incorporate these into family events so that the families also come in and learn how to prepare these different recipes, because that's a big thing when it comes to food, is actually getting the parents involved too. So the featured produce, feature it in recipes of that month. Maybe not something that, kind of slide it into the different menu items. And then lastly is to have connections at home, to send a recipe home to get the kids to see it in that environment too.
Yeah,
So
one other thing I'd want to just add, Sarah, about the tasting events is I've seen, when the kids are actually serving the sample vegetables in a cafeteria or in a classroom, there's a much more likelihood that they're going to try them and actually eat them versus having a parent or a teacher coming around. So there's a little bit of peer pressure that starts happening, and the garden.
It's positive peer pressure, though.
Yeah, it's a positive peer pressure, and the garden and eating vegetables becomes kind of a cool thing to do. You become one of the cool kids who are doing that kind of stuff.
And definitely so, and growing it yourself definitely adds to that excitement factor. So what we're going to do right now is just kind of very quickly, so we make sure to save time for some questions, is talk about, you don't have to go out and do this on your own and start coming up with all your own ideas. There are really good resources out there that are available to you to help with integrating it. For instance, I just mentioned the Simply Good nutrition information, and we'll have a link available right there that you can go and download those from. There's also the Simply Good activity sheets that can kind of be in a fun addition to your classroom, include things like word searches and missing letters. Then we had the Grow Lab curriculum that we mentioned. It was originally developed to help with indoor gardens, recognizing that a lot of schools are in session when outdoor gardens are a challenge. However, it can be used by indoor or outdoor gardens. It's just a lot of really basic plant ideas and activities for grades K through 8.
Yeah,
plant development.
It's another good one for a teacher who doesn't want to jump into the outdoor garden so quickly. They can kind of start indoors, get their feet wet a little bit, and it's been around for 20, 25 years, so it's got a lot of research behind it.
It does. And it's very inquiry-based. All the activities for Grow Lab are very much it's the teacher's a guide and not a leader that's pointing them, hand-feeding them the information. The Growing Classroom is another classic activity. It has a huge amount of activity ideas, and it has both formal lesson activity ideas, and there's also a collection of like songs and fun things that you might want to add into your lesson plans. They call them back pocket kind of activities. So if you're out in the garden and you need something really quick and you don't have any materials with you, you can kind of get kids involved. So just real classic from all it. And they also, a nice thing about the Growing Classroom, I'm clicking too fast, is on their website they actually have a database where you can look up the Common Core and Next Generation standards. It's a searchable database, huge database that they've aligned all of their activities with.
Right, and Life Lab kind of evolved the same time as the Grow Lab did, just on the West Coast, and even though it's not exclusive to that. And of course that famous song, Inch by Row, is right in there.
Charlie, you want to sing, don't you?
I really do.
So the next one that we mentioned already is live curriculum. It's, like I said, it's a science curriculum, but you are looking at the food system. So it fits right in with science basics. There's growing food, farm table and beyond, and choice, control, and change. And they're all about trying to get kids to think about their eating behaviors and agriculture in general. We already mentioned math in the garden and developed to do specific math activities. This is one of my, really love this book. It has lots of ideas that I would have never thought of on my own. So they really came up with some very creative things. And I think the hands-on math is especially good for kids that have a hard time with more abstract processing. So to actually get the hands-on is great.
Yeah, and it is, again, that inquiry-based learning, which is really important, especially for math.
Yes. So Botany on Your Plate is another one that's available that we hadn't mentioned yet, but it's also available to help you do nutrition activities. It's designed so that every chapter is focuses on a different plant part, and at the end it incorporates a recipe into every chapter. So it has a lot of different kind of the central theme though is to eat and taste. It's very much focused on that.
Great.
Books in Bloom we already mentioned. It looks at different children's books.
Stories. Yeah.
And the last one we also have not mentioned yet is a different program. It's called the Junior Master Gardener Curriculum, which is one that is put together through the Extension Service. Junior Master Gardeners are similar to the Master Gardener program in that it's located in each county. You look at your Extension office. But they have a curriculum which is in addition to you being able to use it in a classroom, you can also use it in clubs. They can get pins and finish a certain number of volunteer activities and volunteer time, so they can become an official JMG club. So it's another one that's interesting to check out. And they have the main curriculum that's just general gardening, and then they have specialty areas specific with nutrition. They have a Learn, Grow, Eat, and Go. There's a wildlife gardener. So have one that works with literature. And then finally, I just want to mention that beyond the classroom, if you have some reluctant teachers or you're having a hard time getting it incorporated into your school, another option is to look at some of these other programs just to get your feet wet, to get started. So for like younger students, you can look at the after-school programs, clubs, enrichment time, so that the teachers kind of get a chance to see how that's done and see your garden in action, and then maybe expand later. For older students, you provide it as community service. You have job training, science fair projects, great thing to try and incorporate. So those are all some ideas for you beyond the classroom. And finally, just pointing out a few additional things. Don't forget to grow your program over time, and you need to try and find your way to make that garden kind of part of the culture of your school. And it's going to look completely different. Your school will look different than any other school garden. So Charlie, did you want to add on anything to that on final?
Well, I have seen schools, in Vermont especially, that have integrated it into the whole curriculum, and it is true. It's a whole different thing. So regardless of what teacher, what administrator, what staff are there, gardening is part of the curriculum. Gardening is what you're expected to do, and they even, in the interview process for teachers, they tell them this is what is expected and they have to be okay with it. So it becomes just part of that whole institution, like you said at the beginning, which we can't emphasize enough. It's a tool that is used in learning. It's not an add-on. It is something that's integral to the learning.
Yeah, excellent. And additional information is available in the Eat, Learn, and Live School Garden Guide, which is it has a couple different areas that you can find. But in the appendix, we have sample lesson plans there from some of the curriculum that we talked today. You can actually see copies of the curriculum, the specific lesson plans, and then some more ideas for customizing it. So, and Charlie, did you want to mention next month
before we right now would be a good time, if you haven't written any questions down yet, if you do have questions about anything Sarah and I presented here, you can just go onto the control panel in that question area, just type it in, and we'll try in the next 10 minutes to answer as many as possible. But before we do that, while you're typing, I just want to give you a little plug for our next webinar, which will be October 20th, again at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This one is taking it a step further. This is harvesting the most from your garden with the idea being, what do you do in the cafeteria? What do you do with all this food you're producing from that school garden? How do you integrate it into the cafeteria, get it as part of the whole, again, atmosphere or the feeling of that school? And we have two great guests from Chartwells. One is Chef Josh Perkins. Chef Josh Perkins from Madison, Wisconsin. That's where he has a lot of his professional experience. He went to school at Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Cambridge, Mass. Returned back to Madison in 1999, managing kitchens there in the city, and for the last 5 years he's been a cooking instructor and purchaser for a farm-to-school snack program in Madison at the elementary schools and middle schools. So he's got a lot of hands-on experience right in the elementary and middle school area. The other woman, Margie Sadel, as you can see, is an RN, LDN, BP, Nutrition and Sustainability for Chartwells. She has more than 20 years of experience in the child nutrition and food service industry. She's worked in the food service industry, in the trenches. She knows about that. And she has been designing programs and support local health and wellness initiatives for 550 school districts and 6,000 schools, including school gardens and their integration into the school cafeteria. So definitely put that one on your calendar, October 20th at 4 p.m. We will remind you. If you've come to this webinar, you'll get reminders coming up. It'll be very exciting learning about all the information they can provide. So I think now maybe we'll invite Larry back, our moderator, and we will take some questions.
All right, I'm on my way, and here I am.
There you are. Okay.
Okay, we have some audience questions from Pauline McKee. Would like to know where the books can be purchased.
Oh, that's an excellent question.
There you go, Sarah. That's a lot of books.
The books are available through Gardener Supply, and if you go to our KidsGardening.org website, you can find a link directly to those books. You'll find a page with the full description of them, and so just head in there.
So it's www.KidsGardening.org.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Larry. I was just going to say there is a PDF that will be on that Facebook page listing all these resources for you. So if you looked at it, it's like, which book was that? What one? You can go to that Facebook page and find out more about it. And there will be this recording of this webinar as well.
Very good. So here's another question from Erica Lee. Are there still grants available, and is there a cutoff date? I'd love to garden with my FCS students, all 400 of them.
Oh, good for her. Well, the Chartwells grant has passed the deadline for that, but the Youth Garden grants is still available, and I'm not sure exactly what the deadline is for that. Maybe Sarah would know.
Well, it has not launched yet, so she still has time. It's going to launch at the end of October, and so you can sign up for our Kids Garden News, and it'll be in there when it opens. We'll have an announcement in there, and you can also, once again, Larry had the website. It'll be posted on there. We have a section under grants.
Right, www.kidsgardening.org. Another question from Pauline, would you suggest starting with an area that is a strength or interest to several teachers at once? For example, math, science as a first step.
I would say yes. It is great if you have collaboration, and if it's not just one teacher. If you just pick one area, it is good to have a group at the beginning to bounce ideas off, because that planning step is a really big part in the building the ownership of the program for the teachers. So if they're involved right from the start in the planning and the initial investment, they're going to be a lot more involved in all the steps as they go. So versus trying to create a program with one or two and then saying, okay, now you can have this too, So it is good if you can get as many people involved. But at the same time, you don't want to spread yourself too thin so that you're trying to do more than you can accomplish. So that's it. You have to keep the goals realistic too. So trying to integrate it fully into every subject would be quite a challenge right at the beginning to put all this, to decide on that. So right. I guess the answer would be yes and no. So yes, get as many people as possible involved, but don't overwhelm yourself at the beginning.
Right, and having a specific topic area like math, science, that's a natural one to start with too. And if that's where the enthusiasm is at the beginning, go with that, go with those teachers, and you can always, once there's success out there, the other teachers in language arts and nutrition and other places might get more excited about working with that garden too. There's nothing that breeds more success than success. So have a successful school garden, even with 1 or 2 teachers, get that going, then everyone else in the school will get excited about it.
So we have another question from Lisette. Will you be able to provide info on garden to cafeteria in relation to school wellness policies? That sounds like it might be something for the next webinar.
Yes, I think they're going to handle that, all the rules and regulations, and that will vary, Sarah knows, depending upon where you are in the country, which school district, etc. But that's an important part to understanding what's going on and what you're going to do with these foods. There are certain rules and regulations about what you can use in the cafeteria, how you can get it into the cafeteria, and you do need to do some research before you even start growing all this food to know what's going to happen with it.
What is the private Facebook page that you have mentioned?
Well, Larry?
Is that my question? Okay, so you have to go to Facebook. I'm going to look into that, and I'll get
Why
back.
don't you look into that?
Yeah, I'll look into that.
Well, it's a Facebook page that that people can access. So there is a link on our website. If you go to the webinar page on the website, it will provide you direct information and a link to that Facebook page. Or I believe you can also do a search and also find it.
And I believe we send out a thank you email after these webinars, and it should be a link in there as well.
Yeah,
so
and I do know it's www.facebook and then /Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow. Okay. So, but we will also send all those links to all of our participants. And then another question is, can you send us this presentation, which I'm assuming is the PowerPoint slide deck?
Yes, and that again will be on that Facebook page. The whole presentation, you can just download it and watch it as many times as you like. If you really like the information and how we present it, go ahead, watch it 3, 4, 5 times.
Okay, so we're talking about 2 different things here perhaps. There's the slide deck from the PowerPoint that we've used during the presentation. There's also a recorded version of this so that you can see Charlie saying that he's not going to sing.
Exactly.
And we will provide links to this on our landing page for this series.
Okay.
Let's see, we still have a little bit of extra time. Oh, here's a good one. Do you have suggestions for getting reluctant teachers involved?
Sarah?
Do you want me to start out?
Why don't you start out? And I'll think.
I have definitely run into a lot of reluctant teachers over the years. So I guess the main thing is to make sure that you're keeping it accomplishable and small. And they need to be able to see the success. They need to make sure that it's not too much to involve. They're not going to be up there every weekend watering. They want to make sure that that, and that's the. So I guess making sure to also combine it with their interest. I think it's great when teachers have something they just love. Like I've run into teachers that just love space exploration. Well, if they love space exploration, there's a plant aspect to them. Encourage them to look into hydroponic growing and the needs of plants, and trying to grow plants up there so you can colonize Mars someday. So there's a lot of it. So find what they love and find a way to try and connect with that. If they love music, if that's kind of their thing, well, they can look into creating different musical instruments in the garden, using plants to make musical instruments. So I guess that's another thing with reluctant gardeners, is to look at what is their interest and see if there's a way to bring them in that way.
And also to make sure that they know you've got their back, that you're there to help them and support them, and there maybe are more than just one of you, but more teachers or other workers, staff, custodians, whoever, so they feel like they're really not going out on a limb all by themselves, but they have a group of people kind of supporting them and helping them to get this done. That's
super. Well, thanks, Sarah and Charlie. We hope that you've learned a few things and you've enjoyed your time with us. The webinar has been recorded, as we mentioned. It will be available to you at the Kids Gardening webpage or on the Facebook forum. Visit the Facebook forum, which is at https://www.facebook.com groups Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow. To ask other questions you might have, and to sign up for our next webinar and to access the recorded webinars. And Sarah and Charlie will be having office hours there as well.
Right.
For our next webinar, we've mentioned we're thrilled to have two experts from Chartwells, Josh Perkins and Margie Seidel, and they'll be talking about harvesting the most from your garden. Thanks so much for attending today. We hope to see you again on October 20th. Have a great afternoon and have happy gardening. Thanks, everyone.